Hello there, and welcome to my vlog of this, the first week of January 2022. So, Happy New Year to you all. I am now back from parts unknown to continue my series of chats about the BattleTech universe and news within the BattleTech community. I usually do a little summary of news first of all, and once again, for basically the last 4 or 5 times that I've done this, there is no news. There's still things available on the Catalyst site. I think they did a bit of a restock between Christmas and New Year, so there's a lot of Innosphere stuff there at the moment. Certainly when I checked this morning. So go and buy BattleTech stuff. Really delighted that that's holding out. Doesn't seem to be any shortages. This bodes very, very well for everybody into 2022. So yeah, all good on the news front. I don't think I'm really going to give any more news until there is an announcement on Wave 3 or there's some major retail update. So I probably just will give a minute at the start of a video to say whether there is stock in or not. Obviously there's lots of interesting things going on with BattleTech. I at the moment just focus on Catalyst games because that's I think where all the buzz is around. But if Ralpatha or anything interesting happens, I will cover that. But I've not seen anything, certainly over the last week. Anyway, now on to today's topic, which I hope is going to be rather spicy. It might stir the pot a little bit, because and this comes from kind of an anecdotal thing that happened to me over Christmas. So I'll discuss that first, and then I'll move on to kind of my theory on why I think this is so. A friend of mine has recently been getting into BattleTech, and over Christmas, they asked me if I'd go over and play a couple of run-throughs with them. They have got the Game of Armored Combat, but that's it. So they'd kind of read through the rules, they knew what was going on, and he basically said to me, "Look, can you just come over and we'll play a game?" To which I said, "Yes. Tell me which your favourite mech is in the the starter pack that you get with the Game of Armored Combat, and I will bring an equivalent tonnage mech and we'll just run a one-on-one, because that is always the best way to teach people, I think, in BattleTech. I always start with one-on-ones and then I gravitate up to two-on-twos. Really keep away from Lance versus Lance because it's just too long, and you can get, if you know what you're doing with BattleTech, if you're an experienced player, you can get through Lance versus Lance quite quickly in classic BattleTech. But doing that with someone who barely knows the rules, you'll be there for hours, and it probably will really demoralise them. So I tend to keep it simple. Anyway, he got back to me and he said, "Right, I've painted them all up." So he kind of chosen a colour scheme for it, painted them up, and he said, "I really, really like the Awesome. I like how it looks. I like its weapon loadout. I think I'm happier there. It's quite a simple mech as well to learn with because it's basically just got two weapon systems on there, with the trinity of PPCs and an S-laser. It's also got good armour, good survivability." To which I kind of had to think about, well, what other 80-ton mech can I bring? And in terms of the mechs that I've kind of got on my books at the moment, and obviously I've got quite a lot, the two that really jumped out were the Zeus and the Victor. I've got the Awesome as well, but I didn't really want to bring, an Awesome versus an Awesome. That's boring. In fact, I wanted to bring something that had different weapon types on there. So, as you can see, I went for the Victor. And I don't think I realised how much I loved the Victor until I played with it against my friend. I've always liked it. I mean, it's very much like a Fedcom mech, kind of. It's got that big ballistic gun on there, so the FedSons certainly like it. I'm sure that it's kind of integrated in a lot of Fedcom forces. Most known for its jump capability, but with an AC-20 weapon, which is just brutal, especially if you're playing in 30-25 era. So anyway, I rocked up there with my cheeky little Victor that I've painted in Davian colours and went up against his Awesome. And when you're doing one-on-ones like that, especially with big hitting mechs where you've got PPCs and AC-20s, I think we were running through a game in between 30 and 45 minutes. So we had a series, we had actually 3 games over the course of an afternoon and an evening. So we'd do a game, break off from it, have a chat and a cup of tea or something, have something to eat, and then we'd come back and have another game. And we did that 3 times. I think he is really quite into historical war games. So he's very like tactically competent, far more than I am. He's much like he's got a much broader like palette than I do when it comes to tabletop gaming. So he was like, I think, just wanted to run through those scenarios so he could see exactly how the mechanics of the game worked against another person. And out of the 3 games that we had, I beat him comprehensively twice, and we drew the one of the games. We drew the middle game, but the first one and the last one that we played, I won pretty comprehensively, which at the time I was shocked about. But now that I've kind of run it through in my head and analysed it a little bit, I'm not actually shocked at all. And I've come to the realisation that as far as 80-ton mechs go, the Victor is far superior to the Atlas, the Awesome. And I think there are a multitude of reasons for that. And I think there's a lot of spin about the Awesome. I think a lot of people buy into the marketing that the Awesome kind of delivers. For instance, there is like a very famous quote that the Awesome, you'll probably find it on the Sana article, which we'll look at in a second for the Awesome, where somebody once said that the only way to deal with an Awesome is another Awesome, something like that. I hear that like parroted a lot in the BattleTech community. The Awesome to me has got some really terrible tactical flaws. But as a solid, like, standalone mech, it's very, very competent. You know, it's got the armor, it's got 3 PPCs on there, so of course it hits, you know, the opponent up very, very well. But there's a couple of things on there that really, really hurt it, as far as I can make out. And it's kind of been, I've always thought that a little bit about the Awesome, but I've never really kind of had that thought so prominent in my mind until after I did this little series of games with my friend. And it just kind of showed up all the tactical issues that I think the Awesome has. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm just going to have a look at a couple of separate issues surrounding the Victor and the Awesome, and talk about the comparison that I'm going to do. And we'll do it on the flex sheets because they're great. It obviously shows you like the full armor and armaments of a mech and things like that. So the first thing to note is that I'm only really going to be comparing the 30-25 variants of these mechs. So that will be this variant of the Victor, which is the VTR9B, and the Awesome, which I think is the 8Q. Yeah, the AWS-8Q. We'll deal with the Victor first, though, because it's important to note that as you get into the clan invasion and the inner sphere technology starts to get better, all the mechs kind of, or not all of them, a lot of the mechs come up to really good levels of spec, and all the kind of idiosyncrasies and problems that they had in this era, kind of into 30-25 up to basically the 1340s, the 30-25 to the 30-40s, I should say. You basically have a lot of them fixed. Things like, you know, the variant of the Awesome that we'll look at for the clan invasion swaps out its PPCs for extended range PPCs, which kind of mitigate all the tactical issues that I personally have with the Awesome. But as a stock mech goes, someone kind of getting into this game, if you're probably going to be looking at 30-25, I think that's what most people gravitate towards initially because it's very simple. There's not that much electronic equipment about. The forces are very, very standard, and you know, like that's personally why I love 30-25, because there aren't the overpowered clan mechs, and there aren't all the kind of weird and wonderful electronic systems which, you know, give you lots of like bonuses and boons, and quite frankly things that I find quite boring when it comes to tabletop. It's why I really don't play after the Fedcom Civil War, because I think it starts getting farcical. But 30-25 is like absolute raw BattleTech, where you have literally got nothing more specialised than like AC weaponry, missiles, M-lasers. You get the odd mech that's got something special on it, like the Raven, which was developed around this time, which does have some very basic electronic equipment on there. But in general, you are really kind of, you know, at a very base level when it comes to technology. A lot of the Star League's tech at this time has been lost. So it's an interesting time anyway for that, because it's much more pure. Like if you go Lance versus Lance and you kind of adhere to some kind of battle value or whatever, you know, metric you're judging a force by, trying to keep it fair, I always have a much better time playing in 30-25. Personally, I always love the clan invasion. It's because that's when I was a kid, so I do kind of gravitate towards the clan invasion generally. I think that's mostly because of narrative though, and because I love that idea of like the fulfillment of the Star League going badly and like ruining everyone's picnic in the inner sphere. And it just, I love that on like a social level. Like, how would you feel like, I don't know, if, say you're a Christian and you get constantly told like in the dogma of the faith that Jesus is returning, and then Jesus returns, and not only is it a monumental disappointment, but he goes to war with you and does horrible things. And that's kind of what the clans are, right? It's like Kerensky was like held up as this like, well, he'll come back and he'll save us, and then his kind of descendants do come back and they're absolutely awful, like genocidal eugenic lunatics. So it's just like, it's that crippling like feeling that I think they'd get, and I love that as a story. I think it's just a really interesting like dynamic in the narrative. But I think to actually kind of go lance versus lance or run a narrative campaign, I absolutely adore 3025. I think it's just so simple and easy. And if you are a new player, I'd certainly advise you kind of sticking around this area. So I will be judging these two mechs predominantly, but it would be very, very, it wouldn't be proper for me not to mention the kind of 3048 variants of these mechs and going into the clan invasion, because by that time, everything I say is kind of like null and void. So that's one caveat that I will say. No doubt I've given this like video some kind of very clickbaity title. Probably something like, "Fight me, the victor is better than the awesome," or something like that. Anyway, first thing to kind of look at here, we're just going to look at some very basic like issues surrounding the Victor and the Awesome. So again, 3025 variant, which you find quite common, which is the VTR 9B. Cost is just over 8 million C-bills, which is not... I don't want to kind of compare that against anything and say that it's expensive or not expensive, because obviously it depends on the kind of loadouts and everything else you've got. But that's a hefty sum. Let's just say that. It's not a cheap mech. But it is an 80-ton assault mech, so you don't expect cheap. In terms of its battle value, and we'll just deal with the 2.0 battle value here, it's 1,370, which I think is actually really quite reasonable. We'll deal with anything with loadouts or armor or anything until we get into the flex sheets, but I just want to kind of talk about the cost and the battle value first of all, because they're good metrics on what to judge these mechs by. So just keep that one in mind. Just over 8 million C-bills for cost, and excuse me, 1,370 2.0 battle value. On to the Awesome now. So the Awesome, which is another, this is why I'm comparing them, because they're both 80-ton assault mechs. The 8Q, 6.5 million C-bills. That is cheap for an assault mech. You hear that a lot when people talk about the Awesome, like, oh, it's a very, very cheap mech. That does come into play if you're playing like a narrative game. Let's say you're playing like a mercenary unit where you had like, you were doing missions and campaigns to get C-bills. Having the Awesome, or getting the Awesome, is probably one of the first like assault mechs you'd look at getting because of the cost there. 6.5 million C-bills, very, very affordable with those 3 PPCs. Great armor as well. So I can see why it's popular. I'm not taking anything away from the Awesome. It's just there are problems with it that I'll talk about in a second. In terms of its battle value, it comes in at 1,605, which is probably where you'd expect it to be, given that it's got a trinity of PPCs. But again, considerably more than the Victor, though. So again, having just gone through that series of like games with my friend, and I won 2 out of 3, and then there was a draw. And the draw was very much like we were both so smashed up that we really couldn't finish each other off. So both like mech warriors decided to take their toys and go home, because they were like, no, we can't destroy the other mech, so what are we doing? I think if we'd have kept on going, I get the feeling he would have won, because we were very much in close proximity, and he was really going for physical attacks, whereas I still had some weapons left and was trying to like SRM and M-laser him to death, but I'd lost my AC-20. So, but it kind of, who knows? It was probably like a 55 to 45 of who would finish off the other first, so whatever. But you can see there from the battle value, it's considerably more than the Victor. What's that? Yeah, it's like 250 more or thereabouts. So That makes a difference. So even though you get the boon on the cost, that can be good in narrative play, but if you're playing competitively, not so much. Right, so they're kind of the basics. That's really what I wanted to discuss in regards like the core components of this like comparison. Let's now go into the flex sheets. And we're on the 9B Victor here. So first up, hopefully you can see that. I think my head should be on the left centre here, so it shouldn't be covering up any of this data. And hopefully you can see it at this zoom level. So weapon loadouts on the Victor and AC-20, obviously an AC-20, phenomenal weapons. 20 points of damage, absolutely brutal. Range is always slightly problematic though. You can see there it comes in at the same it's actually got a very nice synergy with range because all the weaponry has exactly the same ratios, which is good. Like what you don't really, well, what I prefer in BattleTech is that, as opposed to having like lots of long range and then some short range, because they don't really complement each other. So this means this mech can do a very, very good job for you at a short range. You can't do anything else. Even at middling range, it's going to have to be in close proximity. It does very, very decent levels of punch attack. You can see its left arm actually does have like the hand to punch, so that's why it gets more damage. With the right arm, not so much. It does 4 damage, so understandable. I think that's how it works. And yeah, I think they've mixed this up, have they? Yeah, they have. The picture's wrong. I think the arms should be different. It doesn't matter. I was just looking at that picture because that's the left arm is here, but then the autocannon's on the right arm. So I think they've just got the picture mixed up there. But hey ho. Anyway, the point being that you can do a decent level of like hand attack or punch attack with one of the arms at least. Kicks do really, really decent levels of damage, but doing kicks is always risky in BattleTech because you can fall over if you fail, which isn't great. You also get the death from above opportunity as well. In terms of its loadout, you can see that the like generally speaking. Actually, no, I'm just looking at this. I think I'm actually looking at this wrong. The right arm for the Victor is so it's just as we're looking on. I'm thinking of it when I've just been playing through the BattleTech 2018 game, and when you're looking at like the silhouette, you have to reverse it in your mind, but you don't on this one. It's just kind of, it's my right. So yeah, I stand corrected. I apologise to Flex. They are correct. Anyway, whatever. Let's continue on. The autocannon 20, this is one, we'll talk about the negatives first of this mech, and the one major negative is the armour on the arms. So you can see its armour comes in at 15, which is really quite light for an assault mech. That is equally problematic, given that that's where its big gun is. And it's no surprise to me that when we did those, like, 2 games, when I did the 2 games with my friend, I had the autocannon destroyed once and almost destroyed once. I really looked out. I got a crit on the right arm and it got the shoulder, which is like, so it was like double rolling a 1 and a 1, which was like super lucky for me, obviously, because pretty much like, what's that? 10 out of 12 of the slots are taken up with that AC-20, and if one of those slots gets destroyed, you lose your entire gun. So it is a little bit of a glass cannon, literally, it's got the cannon and it's not got much armour. It's like paper thin armour around it. So that is a negative for sure. However, in like 30-25, just fielding AC-20s can be a real difference maker, especially with a mech that is this manoeuvrable. And that's where I really want to focus on like the positives of this particular mech. So if we just look at its like manoeuvrability stats here, walking 4, running 6, jumping 4. That's superb for an assault mech. That really does mean you can close the enemy down pretty proficiently and quite quickly. That jumping option is superb as well, especially if you've got terrain around you like trees. You can jump into those and basically sit in there, and if the enemy dares come near you, then you can take the wrecking ball to them, or if you need to get close to them, it's quite easy for you to jump out. So that's fantastic, and that gives this mech its like real like USP to some extent, because it's got that AC-20 and it's jump capable. And I was finding this in the games that I was playing with my friend. I was not actually shooting at all for the first like 2 or 3 turns. He was obviously firing off at me all the time because he had to, because the PPCs and they've got decent range. But I was taking the bonuses from, like the defensive bonuses that you get from running or jumping. And he was like finding it really difficult to hit me, especially because we were using stock pilots. So we had the gunnery skill of 4 and the piloting of 5. So he was tending to find that he needed like 10s, 11s, or 12s to hit me with a PPC. Mostly 11s and 12s, which is really, really like horrible. And I was basically coming up to him at point blank range with an AC-20, maybe with just one PPC hit, and he was then at that time generating quite a bit of heat. So yeah, it's one of those situations. That maneuverability factor just has a huge like difference, and it's where I think at that moment it kind of clicked in my mind of like, oh, this isn't a fight. This is like this 70% of the time here, if we go against these mechs, I'm going to beat this mech easily, and it's got like 250 battle value on me. Ergo, the victor is a far superior mech. And that, granted, that is how I play anyway. I do like to play like the annoying outmaneuverer. I don't tend to kind of run up centres and like, spark off all my weaponry. I tend to kind of hang back a little bit, see what the opponent does, and then make a move. So does my friend as well. He's a very, very competent, like, tabletop general, if you want to call him that. But he's not used to BattleTech. And that then, I think, like, he's learnt now, though. Like, he started to learn. We had a discussion with it afterwards that was very interesting. It kind of sparked the genesis for this episode today. And there are other factors as well that you can kind of safeguard the victor a little bit by keeping your right hand side like turned away from the enemy. So you just always want to show that left hand side, because on the left arm you've got the 2 M lasers. If you lose the M lasers, who cares? Also, if you take crits on there, you've got obviously you can destroy the hands or the lower actuators, the upper arm actuator or the shoulder. So you can take one M laser out. You're not really that concerned. The one other issue on here, but this applies to any mech that's got a gun or missiles, it does have ammo. So if you get if you get a crit on the left torso or the right torso, you're basically toast. That is a factor. I mean, I think going into, if you're playing like it'd be interesting if you played a Lance of Victors versus a Lance of Awesomes. That would be really interesting to see how much that dynamic changes, because at that point the Awesomes can kind of work in synergy with each other, and like 2 Awesomes can do maneuvering and just shoot 1 PPC. The others can do alpha strikes and like sit back a little bit, and then you alternate that so you can manage the heat. The victors are then going to struggle, I think, to kind of get that close up, because probably maybe 1 or 2 of them will get taken down as they. I mean, it will be, if you drop, say, 1 or 2 PPCs a turn for heat management, you're still going to be firing like between 8 and 10 PPCs, which is crazy. But 1-on-1, which is where we're at, the victor just held the day. Those crits didn't come into play. You can see, keep your right torso turned at all times, because if you keep your left torso showing, even if you take the crit to the left torso, it's only a 50-50 chance of having the it's still bad, of having the SRMs blow up. Likewise, if you have your right torso hit then and on a crit, then you've got 4 of those points are listed as AC-20 ammo, and obviously if one of those gets hit, the mech goes up in smoke. One thing you can potentially do to mitigate that, and you probably would want to do this if you were kind of, in a competitive scenario, you'd want to drop probably all the SRM ammo and 2 of the AC-20 ammos. So just keep 5 shots, because by the time you get up to your opponent anyway, 5 shots is enough to finish pretty much any mech in the game with an AC-20. You can build those rules in as well. Like, I usually do that. If anyone wants to not bring ammo before a game starts, you just kind of have it that they've dumped it on the way there. So that is something you could do. We weren't playing that rule though, we were just playing stock. And again, because I knew to keep my left arm showing, I don't think I ever got any crits on the right torso. Definitely got one on the right arm, like I've said already, on the shoulder. But yeah, I think that was how it worked anyway when we were playing through. So yeah, like I said, there are clear negatives to the victor. Like that. it's not paper thin, but the not great levels of ammo are pretty problematic. Especially, if you're going up against something like an Awesome with 3 PPCs and it looks out and hits you with 2 or 3 of them early on, you can potentially then take an absolutely smashed, like go into the close combat with like a pretty smashed up side torso, which is not going to do you any favours. In terms of heat management, which is kind of the final thing to look at here, I think, yeah. Heat management on the Victor is actually really good. 15 single heat sinks. Comes in at a total of 16 on an Alpha Strike. So you can jump and fire at this. Obviously, you'll only be at like short, medium range. You're not going to be firing from afar because you can't. But in general, if you kind of jumping in BattleTech works, it's always a minimum of 3 heat, but then you have an extra heat for every extra hex or inch you jump. So if you jump the full 4 inches, you're generating 4 heat a turn. Running will be 2 and walking will be 1. So all you need to do is, if you are running and firing, you just drop off an M laser and you're pretty much heat neutral, which is good, obviously. If you are jumping and you're jumping that 4 full inches, you're probably then going to have to drop out, maybe the 2 M lasers or however else you want to do that. The SRM4 as well is, I think that's the redundant weapon on here. I could have lived without that. Just because of the ammo problem on the left-hand side. That is actually a design flaw and a problem. Eventually, again, like all mechs, eventually you'll get case when you go into the clan invasion, which means that only that left torso will get destroyed. That's actually fine for the Victor because it doesn't have the XL engine, which we'll talk about in a second when we see the upgraded Awesome, because that does. Next up then, let's have a look at the Awesome, the 8Q variant. So this is where the comparison comes in. And you can see here straight away, you can see the speed of the Awesome is really limited. It's got a walking of 3 and a running of 5. That's pretty bad. What I need to do, I really need to kind of build this thesis on why I think the Awesome is really overrated. So let's start with that. It's all about manoeuvrability and the minimum range. So having the 3.5 is poor. And basically what they've done is they've sacrificed the engine speed to get more armor on there. And the first thing you notice about the Awesome is it's got really, really healthy levels of armor. So quite considerably more actually than the Victor. Same structure, I believe, because they're both 80-ton mechs. I don't think that will make a difference in this time period in 3025. Tons of heat management as well. 28 single heat sinks is really good. That's really good for crits as well, because if you take that like left torso hit, you've got a very good chance of just destroying 1 heat sink, like so, and that's fine. Just get rid of 1 heat sink, so it's not really that problematic. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that is like a legitimate tactic when you are building a mech. Just fill out as much as the like torsos as you can with things, so that you like reduce your probability of having like a weapon destroyed, or worst case scenario like ammo bin exploding. So they're the good. Like the armor is good. There is no ammo on an Awesome, so that's obviously a massive positive. Where I find the Awesome incredibly problematic, though, is in its manoeuvrability to that minimum range penalty, which I just said a second ago. Why that is a problem? So let's kind of put this into a little bit of a thesis. Minimum range penalty in BattleTech is something that you really need to understand to play the game properly. Now, we're going to ignore the S laser on this, because the S laser is really kind of a redundant weapon. It's got, it does 3 points of damage, generates very little heat. So it's fine just to use, but it's not really a game-changing weapons. It's the PPCs that you want on this. You can't use those weapons in synergy with each other. Like, you're never going to really be able to shoot PPCs on the small laser, or if you do, you're going to get some really nasty penalties for the minimum range for the PPCs. So, and therein lies the problem, that the Awesome is really, really easy to outmaneuver. Yes, it's good walking up the field and pinging off PPCs, and if you get lucky and you get the hits, then it will do good levels of damage. You can see it can kind of manage its heat. 10 heat for each PPC, so 30 in total. Say then you're just walking along, so you're walking down the kind of the road and you're pew-pewing your PPCs. That means you're going to be doing 31 heat. 28 single heat sinks, so that means you're only generating 3 on an Alpha Strike. Obviously, like on the next turn, If you do the same again, you'll be at 6. Then you lose a movement point. You do the same again. You take a modifier to your fire, things like that. So you won't be doing that. You will be dropping out the PPC. So you'll probably be only going in at like, you'll be doing 3-2, 3-2, that kind of thing. You might even be doing like 3-1 if you're running. But even if you are running, just put that back to 0, then you're still only going 5 points. So if you kind of want to get into cover, that's going to cost you more movement points. It's problematic in that unless there is a very, very good like gunnery skill mech warrior in there, you are going to suffer quite badly when it comes to anything coming in close proximity. And I think I would wager, or go so far to say, is that you could beat an awesome quite easily with a couple of light mechs if you kind of knew how to, like, you know, do the whole rear arc thing. It's almost like one of those giant lumbering dinosaurs that you like it looks incredible, and it's weapon loaded. Like, you just think, my god, if that thing decided to get angry, it would just take the wrecking ball to us. But on closer inspection, it's got such problems because once a mech closes in on it, there ain't anywhere to go. You literally don't have the movement points to get in and do like an outmaneuvering fire shot. If you've got a mech like the Victor, which is jump capable, so it can jump those 4 inches or 4 hex spots like around you, constantly just harangue you. If it's still got the AC 20, you are toast. Like, it's going to, which is exactly what happened when we did the, you know, like the one-on-one versus the Victor and the Awesome. So I just think that there's a lot of like PR spin on the Awesome, and when you kind of drill down into the facts and you start to understand the lack of synergy between the fact that it's such a well-armoured mech, but it's like afraid to get too close to its opposition because of the minimum range penalty, you are really in a problematic machine. And I think the only way you can get the Awesome to work is to run it with a series of other mechs that can protect it from itself. So if you've got mechs that can kind of draw the opposition into like fields of fire and into close combat while the Awesome kind of sits back and pew-pews its PPCs, that can work. But you really, really need to think carefully about how you are using it. I've intimated to this already. I also think a lance of Awesomes could be pretty extraordinarily good. That having, you know, 12 PPCs on the battlefield and have it where you are, like, you maybe have to sacrifice one of them, so you just run one of them up to the opposition so they hopefully get lured in and go close combat to it, while the other 3 can kind of sit back like kings in the castle and just fire off PPCs. That could be interesting. But I think as a mech, as a standalone mech, the Awesome has a hell of a lot of problems, and I think it's something worth talking about because the general consensus, I think, that I hear from people, it's like the greatest thing since sliced bread, and it really isn't. And the reason I'm using the Victor as a cross comparison against it is because the Victor's it's not a vilified mech, but I think it's a bit of a considered a mech, like people don't really care about it. But on closer inspection, I think it's far superior to an Awesome. It just didn't get the good PR. One thing I'll finish on then, we will talk about the upgraded versions, because like I said, it would be very remiss of me not to discuss these. We'll do the 2 Victors first. So this is the 9D. This is a 3049 variant from the Inner Sphere, which swaps out the AC-20 with a Gauss rifle, 2 medium pulse lasers, and regular SRM-4. It has case now, though. Great. And it doesn't have all that AC-20 ammo. So this against the clans is actually a very, very strong mech. In case you're wondering, Gauss ammo is not explosive. They're just basically like big ball bearings that it shoots out of it. Although there is a rule in BattleTech that the Gauss rifle, actually, if the Gauss rifle blows up, that actually causes damage because of its like electromagnetic field. So that is a thing to remember. But in terms of if you're going against the clans, this variant of the Victor is very, very good. Any Gauss rifle on the field is worth paying attention to because it does no heat. I mean, 1 heat and it does 15 damage, and it's got 21 max range. So it's an amazing weapon. It's a Gauss rifle. If you do have to go in close proximity, obviously the M-pulse lasers have really terrible range. But, you know, like, I think it's more of a, you snipe from afar, and when the clans inevitably come close to you, because they are usually a lot quicker than Innisphere mechs, and they've got insane range. So if you've got like lighter mechs where they're wanting to get elementals into you, using that, having those M pulses and SRM4s are pretty useful for that. But the Gauss rifle is what you want there, because that 15 points of damage will even make clan mech warriors think twice. The second variant of this, which happens to be my favourite variant of the Victor, and this is Fedcom Civil War variant. So this is 3064. Oh, I could like salivate just looking at this loadout. UAC 20, the king of all weapons. 40 points of damage that bad boy can do. 2 ERM lasers, which is great. You get that little bit of extra range, and a streak SRM4, which is nice. Again, it's fine with a streak SRM because the right torso where it houses all the ammo has got case. The only kind of consequence if the right torso blows up is that you lose the ammo for the AC-20, which is annoying, or the UAC-20. You obviously you lose your right arm as well, and your amazing UAC weapon. But you don't destroy the mech because it's still fitted with a fusion engine as opposed to the XL engine, which is super beneficial. Even though the XL engine is a lot better for the weight class, and it's you get like more movement out of it, and it's lighter. It's problematic because it fits up. Yeah, it takes up so many slots, which we'll talk about in a second when we look at the awesome 9M. But generally speaking, I mean, this guy here is just an absolute mean machine. He's got double heat sinks as well, so it comes in at 24 heat sinking, which is more than enough to manage a full alpha strike and jumping. So just a glorious, glorious version of the Victor. Finally, we will have a look at the Awesome 9M, and this is the game changer for the Awesome. So as soon as you get into 3049, you never want to run anything other than the 9M. It's a superb variant of the Awesome. Why? First of all, it's had the upgraded engine, so it's got the XL engine, which means now it does a 4 walk and a running of 6, which kind of brings it up to spec with other like 80-ton mechs. It has, though, the ER PPCs, which, even though they generate a hell of a lot of heat, they don't have minimum range penalties. And that kind of then mitigates everything that I've talked about. That Awesome can get into range a lot. Well, not into range, sorry. It can get into close proximity and do a lot more damage to the opposition without being outmaneuvered in the process. It's also, those double heat sinks are lovely because, again, if one of your double heat sinks get hit, then you just lose a double heat sink, so it's not the end of the world. So that's very beneficial. This is now where we're getting into the point of this variant of the Awesome is like one of the kings of the assault mechs as far as I'm concerned. It's an absolute beast. The one problematic side of this, so it is slightly mitigated by the fact it has decent levels of armour. Sorry, I've put some damage on there by accident. 24 on each side torso, but if you lose the side torso, let's just test that on flex, you'll see. Obviously, if you destroy the centre torso, that's the end of any mech, so destroyed. But you'll also see, if we go to the side torso and we destroy that, we're also destroyed. Why is that? Because there are 3 points of the XL engine in the side torso, which means we get 3 engine hits, which means the mech is dead in the water. That's the problem with XL engines. I know a lot of people don't like them for that reason. I think I probably would side with that as well. I think they are problematic. If I had the choice, I'd rather just bring a fusion engine. The fusion engines, if we go back to the Victor, or even the Awesome, just the regular Awesome, you can see it just fits up those like 6 sections in the centre torso, so it's a lot more difficult to kind of to hit. You've got so many more options to kind of do crits on those like fusion engine, on the XL engine in the torso, so it can be pretty brutal. Anyway, that's kind of it. So make of that what you will. Just one point of note here. I was so kind of inspired by the Victor, and I really was. Like, I walked away from this thing like with a whole new love and appreciation of the Victor. I've always liked it. I've played with the Victor several times on tabletop. I was actually running an Awesome in my mercenary unit that I have now actually put in paint removal, whatever you want to call it, and stripped it. He's been taken away from the dust counters, and I've actually replaced it with a Victor. because I had so much fun playing that game, and I found like the Victor so satisfying. Having that jump capable ability at 80 tons is just glorious. And why I've decided on that is because the lance that Awesome was in, there were no jump capable mechs. So I feel like I wanted a jump capable mech in that lance. And it kind of all came together. I was just kind of looking at the Awesome, and I had a spare Victor that I'd done the priming on. And I was just like, yep, decision made, I'm going to swap them out. So I've got another two mechs added to my pile, because I'm going to give the Awesome to another force. But my mercenaries are getting the Victor. So there you are. That's my little theory for this week. I think I'll end it on that note. Not much else to say. So I'll thank you very much for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you next time.